The morning sun rested gently on the small town of Ridge Valley, a quiet place where everyone knew everyone, or at least they thought they did. Steven Seagal, dressed in a simple black hoodie, worn cargo pants, and dark glasses, pushed open the wooden door of the town's oldest diner. The bell chimed softly as he walked in. He didn't look like a celebrity. He didn't look like an agent. He looked like a traveler passing through, and that was enough to attract the wrong kind of attention. Seagal moved with calm confidence, the kind you only notice if you're paying close attention. He took a seat at the counter, ordered black coffee, and began eating his breakfast in silence, minding his own business. But he wasn't alone. In the corner booth sat two local police officers, Officer Blake and Officer Ryan. Both were known in Ridge Valley for their attitudes. Blake nudged Ryan and whispered loudly, with a smirk, "Look at this guy. Something's off. Probably some drifter." Ryan nodded, eyeing Seagal suspiciously. Blake stood up, puffing out his chest in authority, and walked straight to Seagal's table. "You lost or something?" Blake asked, voice sharp, as if Seagal had already committed a crime. Seagal lifted his cup of coffee slowly, not even looking up at first. "Just having breakfast," he said calmly. "That's so." Blake leaned closer, ignoring the fact that Seagal showed no signs of trouble. "We don't get many people, like you, around here." The entire diner went quiet. A few customers exchanged confused looks. They sensed tension rising but didn't know what this stranger had done. Seagal remained composed, his voice steady. "Is there a problem, officer?" Ryan joined in, crossing his arms. "Show us some ID." "No." Seagal raised an eyebrow behind his glasses. "Any particular reason?" Blake scoffed. "Yeah." "You look suspicious." Gasps spread across the diner. A waitress froze mid-step, holding a tray of pancakes. Seagal didn't argue. He didn't push back. He simply reached into his pocket and pulled out his wallet. As he handed over his ID, Blake smirked again, completely unaware of who he was dealing with. What happened next left the entire diner in stunned silence. Officer Blake held Steven Seagal's ID between his fingers like it was a piece of trash. He didn't even look at it properly. Instead, he kept glancing at Seagal with that same judgmental stare, the kind that assumes guilt before a single question is even asked. The diner was silent except for the faint hum of the ceiling fan. Everyone watched. Seagal calmly continued sipping his coffee, not reacting to the officer's arrogance. His breakfast plate was still warm, steam rising from the eggs and toast he hadn't yet touched. But the atmosphere had shifted. Everyone knew his peaceful meal was over. Ryan leaned in, sneering. "What brings you to Ridge Valley? People like you don't usually stop here." Seagal placed his mug down gently. "Just passing through. Wanted breakfast. That's all." "This ID doesn't look real," Blake muttered loudly enough for the entire diner to hear. It was a ridiculous claim. The ID wasn't just real, it was government-issued. But he didn't care. He was looking for a reason to escalate. The old man sitting in the corner whispered to his wife, "Why are they bothering him? He hasn't done a thing." But Officer Blake shot a glare in their direction. "Mind your business." Ryan tapped his baton on the counter. "We're going to need you to stand up," he ordered. Seagal didn't move immediately. Instead, he tilted his head slightly and asked, "Is there a reason for this level of hostility, officers?" Blake slammed the ID on the counter. "Don't get smart with us. Stand up." A few customers pulled out their phones and began recording. Blake noticed. "You better put those phones away unless you want to be next," he threatened. But no one listened. If anything, more people began recording. Seagal's voice remained completely controlled. "You don't need to intimidate them. Or me." Wrong move, at least in Blake's eyes. He stepped closer, invading Seagal's personal space. "Let me tell you something. Around here, we decide who looks suspicious. And right now, that's you." The waitress who had been serving Seagal earlier stepped forward bravely. "Officers, he hasn't done anything. He just ordered breakfast." Ryan pointed at her. "Did we ask for your opinion?" She stepped back, heart pounding. Blake snatched Seagal's coffee mug and slammed it onto the table. "Get up. Now." Seagal finally rose to his feet, smoothly, slowly, his body moving like a controlled current. His presence was calm, but powerful enough that several people in the diner held their breath. Ryan stepped behind him, ready to cuff him at the slightest provocation. Seagal simply said, "I'm cooperating. There's no need for force." But the officers weren't looking for cooperation. They wanted confrontation. Blake began patting him down aggressively, as if searching for hidden weapons. Seagal let him do it, never once tensing up. A young woman filming from the counter whispered, "Why are they treating him like this? He's literally just eating breakfast." Her friend whispered back, "Because they think they can." Blake finished the pat-down and smirked. "Yeah, that's what I thought." "Nothing." Ryan crossed his arms. "Doesn't mean he's clean." Blake nodded. "Let's take him outside. Question him properly." Seagal calmly asked, "On what grounds?" Blake leaned in, nose almost touching Seagal's cheek. "Because I said so." A wave of discomfort rippled through the diner. Even people who wanted nothing to do with confrontation were feeling it. This wasn't policing. This was harassment. Seagal remained still, his expression unreadable. "There's no cause for detainment." Ryan grabbed his arm. "There is now." The entire diner erupted in murmurs. Phones were recording from multiple angles. These officers weren't just overstepping, they were digging their own grave. As they pushed Seagal toward the exit, a teenager near the door spoke up nervously, "Hey! Leave him alone. He didn't do anything." Blake spun around. "You want to join him?" The kid froze. Seagal turned his head slightly. "It's okay," he said softly. "Stay out of trouble." Even then, cuffed, pushed, humiliated, Seagal was the calmest person in the room. As they forced him out the diner door, the bell chimed again. But this time, the sound wasn't warm or welcoming. It was chilling, the sound of injustice. Just before the video ends, one of the customers recording speaks directly into her phone camera. "This is wrong. I don't know who that man is, but this is wrong." Before the officers shove Seagal into their patrol car, he glances back at the diners. His expression says everything. This isn't over. Have you ever seen someone abused by authority? Comment below. And tell us, which country and city are you watching this story from? The morning sun outside the diner felt harsher than before, almost blinding, as the officers shoved Steven Seagal toward the patrol car. The customers inside pressed against the windows, recording, whispering, shaking their heads in disbelief. What had begun as a simple breakfast had now become a scene of humiliation. Officer Blake yanked Seagal's arm harder than necessary. "Move it!" Seagal didn't resist. His steps were steady, controlled, almost deliberate. His calmness only fueled Blake's aggression. Ryan opened the back door of the police cruiser and pushed Seagal down into the seat. "Sit tight. You're being detained for suspicious behavior." A gasp rippled through the crowd. Suspicious behavior? Everyone could see the truth. They simply didn't like the way he looked. "You can't just arrest someone without a reason," an older woman yelled from the diner entrance. Blake shot her a warning glare. "Ma'am, step back unless you want to spend the day in a cell." But people weren't backing down anymore. The injustice was too obvious. Phones continued recording. Some whispered, others argued, and a few even shouted at the officers. Inside the patrol car, Seagal remained still. He didn't lean back or slump. He sat upright, almost meditative, watching everything through the window as if studying every detail. He didn't look angry. He didn't look scared. He looked prepared. Blake slammed the car door and turned toward the crowd. "Everybody get back. This is official police business." But no one moved. One man in a leather jacket stepped forward. What did he even do? Blake's jaw tightened. He was acting suspicious. "How?" "Sitting and eating breakfast," the man argued. Ryan walked around the vehicle, irritated. "All of you need to back off. We know what we're doing." But they didn't. They were digging a deeper hole with every minute. Blake climbed into the driver's seat, Ryan beside him. As they pulled away from the diner, the murmurs of the crowd faded behind them. But the videos were already uploaded. Dozens of angles, dozens of witnesses, all telling the same story. Inside the car, Seagal finally spoke. "You're making a mistake," he said quietly. Blake scoffed. "Don't talk." Ryan twisted in his seat to face Seagal. "You think you're tough, huh? Sitting there like some kind of monk. Let's see how calm you are at the station." Seagal didn't answer. Blake slammed his foot on the accelerator, speeding through the small town streets. "People like you think you can come into our town and act however you want." Seagal tilted his head slightly. "I ordered breakfast." Ryan clenched his fists. "Don't get smart." The patrol car screeched to a stop outside the small, outdated Ridge Valley police station. The building looked more like an old government office than a professional station. Seagal stepped out of the car when the door opened, still utterly calm. Blake grabbed his arm again. "Inside. Now." They marched him through the lobby, where a secretary looked up in shock. She recognized Seagal instantly, or at least thought she did, but stayed silent, too afraid to challenge the officers. They shoved him into a small interrogation room with a metal table, 2 chairs, and a dim overhead light that flickered occasionally. The door slammed behind them. Ryan dropped a stack of blank forms on the table. "Sit." Seagal didn't move. "Am I under arrest?" "You are now," Blake snapped, though even he seemed unsure. "For what crime?" Seagal asked, looking straight into Blake's eyes. The officer froze for a split second. It was the kind of question that demanded justification, something he didn't have. Ryan jumped in. "We'll find something." Seagal slowly sat down, folding his hands on the table. "I'm cooperating. But you're abusing your authority." Blake leaned down, face inches from Seagal's. "You don't get to talk about authority. You don't belong here." Seagal didn't flinch. Not even an eyelid twitched. But the room suddenly felt smaller, hotter. Even the officers sensed something wrong, something off about this man. There was a presence in him, a silent power that made them push harder just to feel in control. Ryan lifted his phone, snapping a picture of Seagal. "We'll run you through every database. If you have a record, even a parking ticket, we'll find it." Seagal stared at him. "Be careful." "Or what?" Blake mocked. Seagal simply replied, "Truth has a way of revealing itself." Ryan scoffed. "We'll see about that." Outside the room, the crowd from the diner was gathering at the front of the station. More people were watching, recording, calling friends, calling news outlets. The pressure was building. And inside the station, even the walls felt tense. If you witnessed an innocent person being arrested for no reason, would you step in or stay silent? Comment your answer below. Seagal lifted his gaze, his voice steady, unshaken. "This isn't over." And for the first time, both officers felt a shiver run up their backs, without knowing why. The air inside Ridge Valley Police Station shifted the moment the officers shut the interrogation room door behind them. What they believed would be a simple intimidation session had started to feel like something much heavier. Blake wiped sweat from his forehead, annoyed that he felt nervous, over a man who hadn't raised his voice once. "What is it about him?" Ryan muttered as they walked down the corridor. "He's too calm. Like he knows something." Blake grunted. "He's bluffing." But even he didn't sound convinced. They entered the small operations room where Officer Jenna was typing rapidly at her computer. She looked up, confused. "Did you guys bring someone in?" she asked. Blake nodded. "Yeah." "Suspicious behavior." Jenna's eyebrows pulled together. "What behavior?" Ryan answered defensively. "He was acting strange." "He was eating breakfast," Jenna said flatly. Ryan clenched his jaw. "Look, just run him through the system." Jenna sighed and turned to her keyboard again. "What's his name?" Blake hesitated. He hadn't even asked. "We'll get it." Jenna stared at him. "You brought him in without identifying him?" Ryan snapped. "Just run his fingerprints." Jenna took a deep breath, clearly frustrated, and walked past them toward the interrogation room with a fingerprint scanner in hand. But the moment she opened the door, she froze. The chair where Seagal had been sitting was still warm, but he wasn't in it. The room was empty. Blake and Ryan rushed in, stunned. "What the—" Where did he go? Blake shouted. The room had one door, no windows, no vents large enough for anything bigger than a squirrel. He couldn't have disappeared. Yet he had. Ryan spun around wildly. He escaped. He must have run out when we weren't looking. Jenna shook her head. Impossible. I was sitting right outside this hallway. No one passed. Blake stormed out into the corridor, searching every corner, every office, every open room. But all he found were more officers noticing the rising noise outside. The crowd from the diner had grown larger. They were gathering at the station doors, holding up their phones, chanting, demanding answers. Release him. Show us what he did wrong. You can't just arrest people for nothing. The chief, an older silver-haired man named Douglas Harper, stepped out of his office, alerted by the noise. What's going on? Blake and Ryan exchanged a nervous look. We detained someone, Blake said. And he's gone. Chief Harper's eyes widened. Gone? How does someone disappear from a locked interrogation room? Ryan swallowed hard. We're figuring that part out. The chief pointed toward his office. Inside. Now. They followed him in, trying to appear calm even as panic clawed at their insides. Harper shut the door and folded his arms. Explain. Blake took a deep breath. We brought him in for questioning. For what? Ryan jumped in, suspicious behavior. Harper's tone sharpened. Define suspicious. Blake stiffened. He didn't answer our questions. Harper glared at them. Since when is silence a crime? Neither officer had an answer. Then Harper sat down at his computer. What did he look like? Ryan shrugged. Tall. Black jacket. Strong build. Ponytail. The chief froze. Ponytail, he repeated. Yeah, Blake said. Why? Harper minimized the window and rested his fingers on the desk. Because the FBI sent us a memo last week for internal awareness. About an undercover federal agent working in this region. A highly trained operative. Ryan laughed nervously. And you think that guy was him? Harper stared at them. Did he have a calm demeanor? Ryan nodded quickly. Way too calm. Did he warn you that you were making a mistake? Blake's eyes widened. He did. More than once. Harper exhaled slowly. Officers, you may have just unlawfully detained a federal agent. Ryan stumbled back. No. That's impossible. The chief turned to his computer, clicking through classified messages. His code name wasn't listed, but his description matches exactly. Blake felt his mouth go dry. But why would an FBI agent be here? In Ridge Valley. The Bureau believes a major organized crime ring is operating in the area under everyone's noses, Harper said. That's why they sent someone in undercover. The room fell silent. Ryan's voice cracked. We arrested him. Harper stood up suddenly. You didn't just arrest him. You racially profiled him, humiliated him in public, and detained him without cause. Blake whispered, We're screwed. Harper's jaw tightened. If he reports this, you're facing suspension, investigation, and potentially federal charges. Ryan sank into a chair, hands shaking. We need to find him. We need to apologize. Harper shook his head. You won't find him unless he wants to be found. And just then, as if the universe wanted to prove the chief right, the station lights flickered. A shadow appeared outside the office door. Slow, steady footsteps echoed through the hallway. The chief turned toward the sound. Blake and Ryan held their breath. The footsteps stopped right outside the office. A quiet knock. 3 taps. Controlled. Come. Harper whispered. That's him, isn't it? The officers didn't answer. They didn't need to. The truth was clear. Steven Seagal hadn't escaped. He had simply decided to return. The office fell completely silent as the soft knock echoed like thunder in the narrow hallway. Officer Blake's knees trembled. Ryan swallowed so loudly it seemed like the whole room heard it. Chief Harper motioned for both men to stay behind him. He took a steady breath, squared his shoulders, and opened the door. Standing there, calm, centered, unbothered, was Steven Seagal. Still in his black hoodie. Still wearing the same steady expression. Except now, his eyes told a different story. A story of someone who wasn't just confident, but fully in control. Blake took a step back. Ryan froze. Seagal looked around the office slowly, as if weighing every soul in the room. Then he spoke, his voice low and even. "So, this is how Ridge Valley welcomes visitors." Harper cleared his throat. "Sir, Agent, if that's who you are, I think we've had a misunderstanding." Seagal raised an eyebrow. Misunderstanding is what happens when someone spills coffee on your shirt. What your men did, that's something else. Blake flinched. Ryan looked at the floor. Harper nodded. "I know. And we're prepared to cooperate fully to resolve this." For a moment, Seagal said nothing. He simply walked into the office, not rushed, not dramatic, just controlled movement, the kind that made it clear he didn't fear a single person in the building. He closed the door behind him with a soft click. Blake felt like he was trapped in a cage with a lion. Seagal turned his attention directly to him and Ryan. "You boys think intimidation makes you powerful?" Ryan's mouth opened. Nothing came out. Seagal stepped closer, the room shrinking with every inch. "Real power," he said slowly, "is when you can stop violence without starting it. Control a room without raising your voice. Win a fight without throwing a single punch." Blake tried to muster courage. "Look, we didn't know who you were." "That's the whole problem," Seagal interrupted quietly. "You didn't care who I was. You saw what you wanted to see." Each word hit harder than a punch. Harper stepped forward. "Agent Seagal, I want you to know, Ridge Valley Police Department does not condone this behavior." Seagal turned to the chief. "Since when?" Harper stiffened. "Your officers didn't act alone," Seagal continued. "They acted in the shadow of a system that allowed them to think this was acceptable." Ryan's voice finally cracked through. "We're sorry. Truly." Seagal looked at him, not with anger, but with a depth that made Ryan drop his gaze instantly. "Sorry doesn't erase fear you caused innocent people," Seagal said. "Fear sticks. Fear spreads." Blake whispered, "Are you going to report us?" Seagal didn't answer immediately. Instead, he walked to Harper's desk, glanced at the files spread across it, and then placed both palms gently on the surface. "Tell me something," he said, eyes narrowing. "You two felt comfortable harassing me in front of a full diner. How many others have you done that to, when no one was watching?" Blake's face burned red. Ryan's throat tightened. Harper looked horrified. "Agents, I mean Mr. Seagal, we will investigate." Seagal turned sharply. "Don't investigate because I'm here. Investigate because it's the right thing to do." Harper nodded quickly. "You have my word." Seagal exhaled slowly, then turned back to the officers. "You know, in my line of work, we're trained to read people. Your eyes, your body language, your heartbeat. And right now, I can tell you're not bad men." Both officers looked up, surprised. "You're not evil," Seagal continued. "You're scared. Scared of losing authority. Scared of people you can't control. So you control the ones who seem weaker." Blake's eyes glistened. Seagal's voice dropped to a whisper. "But that stops today." He let the words sit in the air. "Here's what's going to happen," Seagal said, stepping back. "I'm not filing a federal complaint. And I'm not here to ruin your careers." That hit harder than anything else said that day. Harper lowered his head. He knew the answer was obvious. No. They hadn't been treating people fairly. Seagal finally stepped forward again. His presence alone silenced the crowd. "Listen," he said, voice steady. "These officers made a mistake. A serious one. But don't make the mistake of turning this into a war." Everyone leaned in. "We don't fix a broken system by burning it down. We fix it by making sure moments like this never happen again." The crowd absorbed his words. The tension began to soften, not disappear completely, but shift. Seagal turned to Blake and Ryan. You faced the consequences today. The world is watching. What you do next, that will define who you are. Blake wiped his eyes. Ryan nodded slowly, humbled. Seagal stepped past them, walking toward the street. But before he left, he turned around one last time. And one more thing, he added. I didn't come back for revenge. I came back to make sure you understand the weight of your badges. He tipped his head slightly. Then he walked away, disappearing into the crowd that parted for him like water around a stone. Behind him, the police station, and the whole town, stood shaken. Because everything had changed. By the afternoon, Ridge Valley was buzzing with whispers, videos, and notifications. The footage of Steven Seagal calmly standing up to the officers, the moment of recognition, and the subsequent public humiliation of the cops had gone viral. Phones in pockets, social media feeds, and local news stations were flooded with the story. The video opened with the diner scene, Seagal quietly eating breakfast while two officers harassed him. The next clips showed him being forcibly led to the patrol car, his composure unwavering. And then, the revelation. The calm, collected man they had tried to intimidate was an undercover federal agent. Millions of views stacked up within hours. Comments poured in from all over the globe. Wow, can't believe they arrested him for nothing. Respect, Mr. Seagal. This is what happens when you abuse authority. Karma is real. Imagine messing with someone and finding out they're FBI. Finally, someone standing up to racism and profiling. Even major news networks picked it up. The hashtags #RespectSeagal and #JusticeForAll were trending across multiple countries. People were not just admiring his calm and collected demeanor, they were inspired by his strength, humility, and integrity. Back in Ridge Valley, the two officers, Blake and Ryan, faced immediate consequences. The Internal Affairs Division launched an investigation. They were suspended with pay pending a full review, and the local community demanded disciplinary action. Chief Harper addressed the media. This incident is a wake-up call. Our department failed to act appropriately, and we are taking immediate corrective measures. Bias training and accountability protocols will be implemented to prevent this from ever happening again. For Blake and Ryan, the embarrassment was palpable. Not only had they humiliated a federal agent publicly, but the whole world was watching. Their credibility, reputation, and authority were crumbling in real time. Meanwhile, Steven Seagal remained composed, never once boasting or gloating. He gave a short statement to the press outside the diner. Authority is not about fear. It's about responsibility. No one should be judged by their appearance, and no one should be silenced when treated unfairly. Today, I hope we all remember that dignity and respect matter more than power. The crowd cheered. Phones recorded every word. The story became a symbol, not just of celebrity vindication, but of standing up for justice, no matter how ordinary or extraordinary the person. Social media continued to explode. Content creators, journalists, and influencers shared the story, each clip highlighting Seagal's calm bravery. Millions of people around the world were now talking about the incident, commenting on authority, equality, and respect. Even weeks later, the story remained in headlines. Schools, organizations, and police departments used it as a teaching moment. It wasn't just entertainment, it became a lesson. The officers were eventually held accountable. Internal investigations revealed procedural violations and instances of bias. Both faced mandatory retraining, public apologies, and community service, a lasting reminder of the power of fairness and accountability. Seagal, however, quietly moved on. No grand ceremonies. No celebrations. Just a short nod to those who had supported him online, a message on social media reminding everyone. Respect is earned, not assumed. Treat others with fairness, and the world will be better for it. By the end of it all, the story wasn't just about a viral incident. It became a symbol of dignity over intimidation, courage over fear, and justice over prejudice. Seagal's calm, authoritative presence had transformed a moment of public humiliation into a lesson that would echo worldwide. If you believe no one should be judged by their appearance, type respect in the comments. Share this story so everyone can learn the power of dignity and justice.